Let's talk about the #1 arranging technique that will improve your songs and that will also make your mixes sound better. And if you stick around, at the end I'll show you some alternative techniques that you can use. But before we start, let's listen to these simple raw recordings and write down what's wrong with the arrangement. If you've written down that the arrangements sound way too muddy and that there's no separation between the instruments, then you've definitely got it right. The musical parts in both examples, they blend way too much and they get into each other's way. But wait a minute, does this mean that your instruments and parts should never blend? No, that's not what I mean, because everything depends on what you want to achieve with your song, arrangement or mix. But you do need to know that it can cause some difficulties when your instruments overlap too much. Just look at how many notes from my first example are the same. You're practically doubling everything. Now, if we look at it from a mixing point of view, here you can see how much the instruments of my first example are masking each other. The red highlighted areas show the intensity of how much the frequencies of both instruments overlap. The result is that you will have a difficulty hearing who is playing what. And this causes things to sound muddy. So how can you fix this without drastically changing your arrangement or heavily EQing your instruments afterwards? This is extremely easy actually, but the main thing is that I don't want to change my musical parts or the arrangement too much. For the guitar example, both my chords and picking pattern are in the lower register. I like how the lower picking pattern sounds, so my plucked chords will need to make some room. So instead of playing them here, I will now play this way up the neck with my lowest note being on a higher string. This clears things up and in my mix as well. And now I can clear it up even more by rolling off some extra lows with my EQ, since my lowest note is now an octave higher, and second of all, the picking pattern is already providing the lower part. So when we look at my first example, we can do exactly the same. I want to keep the nice and full piano harmonies right where they are. That means that my melody figure or arpeggio has to get out of the way of our piano. I simply did this by moving it up an octave. Now, from a mixing point of view, again we can scoop out some of the low frequencies that we don't need, since the piano is already providing these. Now that you've created more separation, you can play around with the dynamics or the volume to make things blend a bit more or a bit less, but they will still remain separated. So, the best of both worlds. As promised, here are some alternative techniques that you can use for when you want the instruments to stay in the same range. Now, if you're getting value from this, then why don't you give it a thumbs up and share this video with your musical friends? I mean, you made it this far. Here's what you can do to create more separation. You can make the parts rhythmically different, or you can play the parts with different dynamics, and you can use different articulations. So, for example, one is played staccato with short notes, and the other with long legato lines. And whenever possible, play the parts and explore different timbres on your instrument. For example, one instrument plays near the bridge, while the other has the warmer sound of the neck part. I challenge you to write some wonderful arrangements and new music that translates into great mixes. And if you have any of your own useful tips, then why not share them here with us? And of course, stay inspired, stay creative, and for now, see you next time.